Hey, John.
Hello.
Ho, ho,
Your Christmas
ho.
outfit.
Merry Christmas, John. Merry Christmas, everybody. This should be going up on the website Christmas Eve. I hope everyone's having uh, a wonderful time with their family.
You go head on. I'm going to go
And
head on. Now that you go head
yeah,
on. Anyway, whatever.
I'm having a wonderful time here with John. And today we are talking about an astonishing book for children. No, I'm not going to call it a book for children. It's an astonishing book by Dodie Smith called uh, I Captured the Castle.
It's really, Nick. The I can't be more grateful to you for basically forcing me to read these books that I'm supposed to, supposed to have already read, whatever. And this book has changed really my approach of telling people about J.K. Rowling. I mean, it really has. This is a transformative book for a Rowling reader. And if you're a Rowling reader, I recommend you drop everything and get a copy of this book. It's out in new editions now because of Rowling's recommendation. I'm going to see what the publisher of this one was. When Elizabeth Barrett Hardy first wrote about it, this is from Thomas Dunn Books, which is an imprint of St. Martin's Griffin. When Elizabeth Barrett Hardy wrote about this years ago, people in the comments complained they couldn't find a copy of it.
Yeah.
In the United States. Maybe I think it's always been in print in the UK. So now it is in print. They've done movies, I think, and such. I mean, it's really well. Anyway, we'll talk about this. But first of all, I want to thank you for this. This is part of your project, Nick. We spoke during our Aurora Lee recording about your long-term project, not to read all the books that Rowling has admitted to have read. Link down below. The first question is why did you decide to do that? And second, how is that going?
So the why is it's just a great reading list. So it is a superb reading list, and I wanted to get into conversations with you and with Elizabeth and Beatrice and Louise, who are all talking about the books from the J.K. I'm going to call it the J.K. Rowling canon. So the stuff she talks about that we know she loves, and I've never read.
Please call it her bookshelf, because the canon is the stuff that's a big thing in fandom about what's canon and what's not canon in Rowling works. So just call it Rowling's bookshelf, because if you do the canon thing, everybody does this start, like, of course it's canon. She wrote it,
I was thinking of Bloom and his Western literary canon, but I take your point. Yeah, the bookshelf. I have massive gaps in my adult reading list because I stopped reading literature from about the age of 18. But thanks to this project, I've also identified I've got a massive gap in children's literature as well, because certainly when I was growing up, and I think it's true today as well, boys just don't read books that they perceive as being aimed at girls. So I read Rowling's list, and there is Anne of Green Gables and Black Beauty and Little Women and The Limberlost and A Cabin in the Woods. And I've read none of these. Now, of those, I know my sister has read Little Women and Anne of Green Gables and Black Beauty because the books were in our house, but I would never have dreamt of reading them. So I was reading what the male literary bookshelf for when I was a geeky boy was Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams and J.R.R. Tolkien, and they were our shared text. That was what we talked about.
No Hardy Boys mysteries.
No, they never really made it over here. But yeah, so there's a huge.
Why wouldn't you read a book about someone capturing a castle? That sounds very masculine.
So I Capture a Castle was so unknown to me, and I think it is in recent years it's been a word of mouth cult classic amongst teenage girls because you're right, John. It's never been out of print in the UK. Beatrice Groves in the comment to my blog said it spread through her school like wildfire. So that's obviously it's word of mouth. You and I can believe, but once you've read it, you're a bit of an evangelist. You have to tell somebody about it because it is such a different book and such a good book. Um, but there's so very recently I read Aurora Lee. Through the summer, I'd read the Little Women series and I Captured the Castle. Uh, and there's just that beautiful link between the the three of them. So, and it's can we call the series, John? Can we call it Rowling Reads Writers Writing About Writers Writing? Will that work as a series title?
That's a lot of W's and R's in there. I don't
It's
know.
I'm a sucker for alliteration.
Imagine a Japanese person saying that sentence, and you say, "No, it's not going to sell in Japan." That's tough, you know. But anyway, yeah, you know, Rowling's, uh, Rowling's, reading writers writing about reading.
Yes.
Um, I mean, but it's writing about reading and writing, because that's what she does.
Yes.
Is she writes about reading and writing,
Yeah.
and here we have these three books that you've, chosen out of all the works that she's said that she's read and enjoyed, and said, okay, look, here are the books that she read as a young woman, we think, and they're about women writers of different ages,
Yeah.
and different time and place. Well, one's 19th century, one's the United States, one's in the 19th century, and one's, I don't know
Set in the 30s. Yeah.
I mean, it's set in the 30s, but it's more the 1830s really than it is. I mean, it's hilarious. Yeah. The whole thing. It's really oh well. Let's but anyway, how is that going for you? I mean, you said,
Yeah.
you explained why you were doing the reading, and now you've got these three pieces that you're putting together.
So in the links down below, there is the article that John has put up, and we maintain it every now and again. It's a list of all the works that she said she's read, or we've identified on her bookshelves, or there's some link to this is within her literary world. And there's a real mixture in there. So there are books like I Captured the Castle that can be quite challenging actually in places, but is an easy read. It is aimed at, I guess the modern term would be young adult, so sort of teenage years. That there are books aimed at children, which are lovely light reading. And there's really quite challenging work. So there's the Fairy Queen, which I've made one attempt at. I haven't finished my attempts yet. And there's Aurora Lee, which is much more scary actually than the practice of reading it. I think the biggest block to Aurora Lee is fear of not understanding it, or finding it too much of a struggle. But there's a lovely mix there. And I'm thoroughly enjoying working my way through it. I must be sort of an eighth of the way through it. There's a huge road to go, but it's just a great joy to do. Aided, of course, by the seminal books on this subject, pioneer of which is John's Harry Potter bookshelf. So I was stunned to discover that you hadn't read I Captured the Castle. Now, I appreciate at the moment you are living in Granger Towers in sort of a 19th century pre-electricity atmosphere. So how is that reading going?
Yeah, I am. I want to first. I want to say thank you for forcing one of the two literary illusion pillars to read. Beatrice obviously has read Capture the Castle, and she didn't include this in literary illusion in Harry Potter. One assumes because it was 20th century.
Yeah.
And she didn't write about any 20th century. I didn't have that excuse. I wrote about plenty of 20th century authors, and didn't include this one. I think because of the dispute about whether she'd read it or not. I just once I saw that she hadn't read this until she was writing the Harry Potter novels, therefore it couldn't have been an influence. And I just took it off my shelf because you can imagine what I had to do to write that book. Um, no, I didn't read Fairy Queen. That really wasn't something that she talked about until Troubled Blood. But I shouldn't say that. Elizabeth Baird Hardy, Spencer, scholar, she'd picked that up already, but I didn't get those influences. And incidentally, Nick, if you want to read Fairy Queen, just read one book.
Okay.
Don't try to read the 6 books, because first of all, it's a 12-book thing that never got finished. So just read the books. And the first book will give you the Red Cross Knight and Una, and that's really, I mean, people talk about Article and all, the 2 knights. Fine, great. That get through the Red Cross Knight and Una, because that's what you need for Troubled Blood. There's a character named Una in Troubled Blood. There's not one named Article. Just back off on that. Anyway, so I'm here I'm homeless. I'm living in the spare room with my wife, and sometimes my son. He's always my son, but sometimes he's in and out of here. And my dog, and we are looking for a new place to live, and struggling with landlords and all sorts of wonderfully Dickensian elements here. I feel like it's not quite David Copperfield, but we're definitely getting a lot of Murdstone action here, and we're getting Peck Sniffian things from Martin Chuzzlewit. It's pretty ugly. And last night, I've been packing. I've been packing boxes. I have more than 100 very large boxes of books, and I have 25 boxes of LPs. Again, large, very heavy boxes of LPs. And I've been just doing that in a house with no heat and no light in December. So it's been quite the thing. And so we threw together that show about Hallmark Man, my morning inspiration. We put up that show. It's gotten a wonderful response. Thank you out there, all the people that have watched that marathon session. And now I want to be charting book 5 of Hallmark Man, because I'm obliged to do that. But sorry, folks, I can't do that in the dark. It's really very, very difficult. So my friend in Wales put up this article about I Capture the Castle. I had to find the Smith box in my thing, which is just beneath the 3 boxes of Shakespeare, not to include the Shakespeare LP box. But anyway, I break it open and sure if I have the copy. I also was able to find it online. I downloaded it. Anyway, I read the book, a combination of audiobook, combination on my screen, and the hard copy. Last night, surrounded by boxes. My son packed up almost all the kitchen things, so I'm surrounded by kitchen boxes. I literally have a lantern, Nick. It's a battery-powered lantern, but it's still a lantern. And there's also a candle burning. Literally, I'm in this pre-electric house. It's about 45 to 50 degrees, no wind inside, praise God. And I'm finishing. I've been listening all day while packing to the audiobook. And I thought, no, I can't do this way. I fell asleep at one point listening to, not while packing, but taking a nap. I fell asleep on near the end of chapter 15. I said, I can't do this. So my wife went to bed. I sat up, got an extra layer or 2 on, Nick, and got into chapters 15 and 16 and read those things with the codex, and was literally blown away. The book had been engaging up to that point, and there were some interesting things, but the payoff in chapters 15 and 16, there's part of chapter 13 that I thought were really important for understanding Rowling. And I was really looking forward to reading your piece on it because I thought, oh, he's going to see this connection. And I'm just so excited about reading what Nick says about this. And I read Nick's thing, and I don't know whether to be thrilled or disappointed, Nick, that you didn't see the one thing that actually, there's like 3 or 4 things that I thought, oh, Nick's got this one. But I still folded the page, like, oh, whatever. We'll come back to that. Anyway, I literally put the book down and I was shaking. The scene I'll describe at the end of this conversation, where I just dropped the book and said, I can't believe she just did that. Dodie Smith, the author, has a character say something about what writers do at the very end of the book that I thought, that's straight from a perennialist understanding of what writers do. And I've always asserted that was exactly what Rowling was doing by using the traditional tools she does in her shed. I've been saying that, Nick, for 20 years, and to see a writer that Rowling admires saying this. All right, whether Rowling has read this or not, that's going to be my next question to you. Those of you who actually read all these things that we have down below know that I always try to print the questions up in advance so Nick and I don't go absolutely off the rails.
We usually go off the rails anyway.
Nick, yeah, I was born off the rails. I don't know what your excuse is. Anyway, I didn't read your piece until after I'd finished reading Captur, of course. But I see, in your thing at the very bottom of your piece, there's some dispute about when Rowling first read it and its consequent influence on her as a writer. I mean, if she didn't read it until she's halfway through writing Harry Potter, well, what's that about? Can you bring us up to speed on that on that subject and where you land on this controversy?
Yeah, so there is an absence of evidence. So we know she liked the book because on every recent edition, there's the J.K. Rowling blurb. And if you've got J.K. Rowling blurb, just like, the little white horse, you're going to put it on the cover because that is going to drive your sales. So the blurb says, one of the most charismatic narrators I've ever met, J.K. Rowling. So
that's actually a nothing endorsement for this quality book. I was just like, what?
In terms of
narrator? Who walks away from this book and says, well, that was a charismatic narrator? Charismatic narrator. What does that mean? Anyway, I think she's engaging, but it's
yeah. But it's evidence. So we have firm evidence that J.K. Rowling has read this book and has enjoyed it sufficient that she's willing to put blurb on a cover. Now, I don't know whether J.K. Rowling went to the publishers and said, please put this on the cover. I think it's likely that this came from an interview and the publishers then requested her people, can we put this on the cover? What that interview is, I can't find any trace of it. On the back of Elizabeth Baird Hardy's article on I Capture the Castle, link down below.
Did you read Elizabeth's before you wrote yours?
No.
That was hilarious. I mean, because you could do the things the two of you saw. Is like, wow, this is really amazing. Anyway, go on. That was like,
but
check.
I actually found Elizabeth's article when I was looking for the source of this quote on the blurb, and that took me to the comment on the bottom of her article. The comment says, I seem to remember that J.K. Rowling only read this in her later years. She was gifted a copy on a post-Prisoner of Azkaban tour of the US by a fan. Now, this comment's been repeated a couple of times on the internet on forums, and the fan has changed into being a bookseller. But I can find no authoritative source for it. So the short and dirty answer is we don't know when she read this, except thank you, Beatrice Groves, in her article looking at the new J.K. Rowling website, where there is a copy of I Capture the Castle. She references the original J.K. Rowling desktop website way back in the early days of Harry Potter, where there was also a copy of I Capture a Castle. And the text to that says, when I was a child, I read absolutely anything. These books are the ones I particularly loved and then read time and time again. Now,
Wow,
not
that's
not
incredible.
directly referencing it, but she said these books. So I think we need to take that for all the books that are on that website, which includes I Capture the Castle. That's not
Okay,
to
no,
say,
I I checked this. You referenced this in your piece, and so
yeah,
I immediately went on this and had to scroll around. I've never done the Rowling's website thing, but I
yeah,
feel there's got to be books on here somewhere. Nick said there's a book on here somewhere, and I found the bookshelf. It's got Colette, it's got
yes,
Jane Austen, it's got E.
yes,
Nesbit, it's got the complete Shakespeare, it's got Anne Sewell's Black Beauty. I mean, and that's pretty much it.
yeah,
And the top ones on the shelf above Austen, Smith, and Sewell,
yeah,
um, there's Colette and Shakespeare and one other, but those things don't get you into ruffled pages when you click on it.
yeah,
When you click on Jane Austen's, what was it, Sense and Sensibility,
yeah,
and then I Capture the Castle, and then Black Beauty. When you click on any one of those three, you get the message that Nick just read to you. These are
yeah.
the books I read over and over and over again. Now, Nick, that's pretty strong evidence.
I,
That she. I
I
mean,
think so. I think so.
I mean,
I think this was a seminal text. Again, I think she was fortunate, well, partly fortunate, because she was a voracious reader, but also, that I Capture the Castle doesn't appear on many syllabuses. It is very much a word of mouth between teenage girls kind of text. So I think she was fortunate to discover it. I don't know, and I've spoken to my female relatives, and they don't know anyone who's read it. So in our neck of the world, it made no impression at all.
that makes me feel a lot better. I mean, Dodie Smith is famous, but she's famous for 101
Yeah,
Dalmatians, largely because of the cartoon, the animated and the live action movies that have been made from it. Having read this book, I'm very interested in reading 101 Dalmatians to see if it's as good, because I mean this is first
yeah.
tier. I really love this. Um, this I mean, how can I say this?
I,
I'll say this. I do wish I had read it before writing Harry Potter's bookshelf. It would
yeah,
have, and there's Harry Potter's bookshelf. If you haven't read that, what's wrong with you? But if one of the reasons to read it is because I explain how there's a surface level, there's a moral level, there's an allegorical level, and there's an anagogical level, and there's tools specific to each one of those things that make them work and makes them tie together as a unity. And I use examples from Rowling's bookshelf to show the best of that, something to illustrate that. And I think I could use Capture the Castle for almost every single one of those layers. It's that good. So
yeah,
I think this definitely belongs with Aurora Leigh and Little Women on the Rowling Reader Essential Reading List. Um, the part back, of course, I'm reading your piece and I'm thinking here now. First of all, Nick, usually I get to do the shed stuff, which is the intentional literary artistry, and you do the lake things, which are the biographical stuff. But the biographical stuff, because Rowling is so lettered and is so much about reading and writing,
yeah,
includes her bibliography, and that's where the lake and the
yeah,
shed really intersect. And so this is fun time for me because I read the book and I'm counting the chapters. I'm thinking, oh, I wish I had. I'm doing John, the codex guy, is listening to the audiobook and says, oh, this is chapter 12. What would that be in terms of the course? If I'm doing a 16 chapter ring, what would that look like? Anyway, when I read the Nick Jeffrey piece, I'm thinking, okay, what is Nick going to pick up on this? And sure enough, you point out just the thing that's just So in your face obvious to me is after you pointed out, is that once again, I mean, it's as if this is a Rowling book.
Yeah.
There's this landed gentry is straight up the street, and
Nearest
there you
neighbor.
got a, and there's the ramshackle house that's, part of the former estate. I mean,
I think
I
we
thought,
can
wow.
I think we can ignore little Thomas and say that there's two sibling girls living with a maybe slightly odd but supportive mother and a bad dad. We've got the church right next door, cold and drafty, which is going to be, the castle and the battlements and I think Rowling would have found herself very at home. She had nothing like the grinding poverty at home that the Mortmains had to endure.
Yeah, I
But
mean, say what you want about Peter Rowling, but he was a
yeah,
provider. The
yeah,
guy, he really had moved his family up several notches.
yeah,
And by your graces and charity, I got to visit Church Cottage, and not the inside at least, but I got to see the church and the church cottage. And it's a very nice home in a wonderful neighborhood. I don't know what it was, of course, 30, 40 years ago, but it doesn't look like that neighborhood has seen much of a shift, Nick, in
no,
2 centuries.
no,
So I'm not just, that's, so we see these correspondences that you laid out in your article, and um, there's more there than even you. I was thinking like, wow, I'm going to start doing the lake thing because Nick, where is Nick on this thing? And the church next door to Rowling's house, which we visited together, is and the graveyard is such an enormous presence.
yeah.
It's basically her front yard.
Well, so
It's
so there's a reason why it's called Church Cottage. So it's the house is actually within the domain of the churchyard. J.K. Rowling grew up in a graveyard. If you look down from bird's eye above, the sort of oblong domain of the churchyard has got a little cutout where this cottage is. Now, originally it was the Church of England school, so that was the schoolhouse for the little congregation in the church. There's a trap door within the house, and that was a coal cellar. That was where the
there's
milk.
no three-headed dog, but there
No three,
is
no,
there is a
no, no
trap.
three-headed
Okay.
dog. But that was the coal cellar where the milk was compulsory for school children for right up until Margaret Thatcher abolished it in the 80s. That's where the milk for the school children would have been kept. So it isn't really apart from the church. It was built at the same time. It is a part of the church. So literally, you look out the windows at the back of the house, you've got the graveyard and the church. It is less than a stone's throw away.
Well, Nick, I don't know how you overlooked this. Maybe you thought I'm going to see if John catches this, so we do this right. I um, there's a where I went to school undergraduate. I went to the University of Chicago, and it was founded by J.D. Rockefeller, or his money founded it, and they built a church there, Nick. It's called Rockefeller Chapel, and it was only called a chapel because it wasn't consecrated. It's one of the largest churches in the United States. I think Princeton's church cathedral is a foot longer. Maybe just to stick their finger in the eye to Rockefeller's chapel, but I mean it's an enormous Gothic cathedral. And when I arrived there in 1979, and I remember the first quarter, there was a controversy because they had decided finally to lock the doors on Rockefeller Chapel at night. And they asked Bernard Brown, who was the dean of the chapel, why they were locking the doors now. And he said, there are more souls being conceived than saved at night in the chapel. So until that time, though, it was a commonplace in the United States, really right through the 70s, for churches to leave their doors open at night. Not so much as a sanctuary for the homeless, but for those people that would want to come in and pray. And I wonder if the church next door to Rowling hadn't left their doors open. I don't know. I don't know what practices
So
are in the
so
UK.
I think it was incredibly common to have the doors of the church left open 24 hours a day. So the policy may have been a little bit different for churches that are out of the way, like this one. But the town church here in Lantwick Major, right through to certainly the mid 80s, was the door was always open and you could
Okay,
walk
so
in.
I'm not making that up. I'm not
No,
making
no,
that
no.
up. And here's the thing: is if you read chapter 13, where the heroine and the narrator of this wonderful book goes into a complete breakdown. Her first love difficulties and her family and her sister. I mean, it's complicated, but here's a remarkably sensitive, brilliant writer who writes in a very modern style, speed writing, it's sort of stream of consciousness style. She uh, she has something like a nervous breakdown. And she winds up going to the vicar, this man that she trusts because of his charity, his generosity, and his intelligence, and certainly his welcoming nature. It doesn't hurt that he clearly admires her and her father, and her family. And he goes to him, and she asks him basically for help. What's this about? And they have a wonderful conversation about God and religion and faith. And I'm not going to spoil that for you, but I've already spoiled it for you in a way. But I will tell you what he recommends, not in any forceful fashion, but just as an aside, maybe you should attempt this someday. And then he, of course, tells her to go into the chapel to look for something for him or to close a window or something. And there she is in the chapel, and she thinks, well, why not do what he asked me to do, which is to sit in the chapel in silence when there's no service going on, and to open up all of her senses to what she experiences there. And Nick, this is an extraordinary passage, what she experiences there. I am going to spoil, to me, the real killer is, I have often tried. I once had an idea it was the way to foresee the future, but I never got any further than imagining blackness. Sitting on the altar steps, I saw a blacker blackness than ever before, and I felt it as well as saw it. Tons of darkness seemed to be pressing on me. Suddenly I remembered a line in a poem by Vaughan. There is in God, some say, a deep but dazzling darkness. And the next second, the darkness exploded into light. That's not Vaughan, that's
No.
the narrator. And the next second, the darkness exploded into light. Was that God? Did it really happen? I asked myself. But the honest part of my mind answered, no, you imagined it. And she goes on from there. She is literally illuminated by having this experience inside the church. And it's as an aside, but her life changes from that moment forward. Nick, I can't believe that Joe the reader doesn't run next door to see what she felt there, imitating what Cassandra, the reader writer, had experienced in that passage. And then we have, and Nick, shame on you. We have a correspondence with Beatrice Groves' favorite scene in the Strike series. That's fairly plain, isn't it? I mean, here's Cormoran Strike in agony about the death of his former lover. And where does he wind up? He winds up in an empty church listening to the silence. And he has a conversation with the departed. I mean, that was a wow moment to me. I thought, okay, we got the church next door. I just can't imagine if Rowling did read this as a child. And boy, that website really points to the fact that she read this thing
read it and
repeatedly as a
reread
child.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. That she doesn't go next door and enter that church and sit there in silence. And I bet she does that more than once, Nick. That becomes really her moment.
Yeah.
Because the vicar doesn't invite her to be religious. he invites her to be sensitive to the intersection of art and faith and prayer. I mean, it's that chapter alone, Nick, chapter 13, in that passage, if I'm right, and I think is, in all likelihood, if we're assuming she read this book, I can't believe, living next door to a chapel, she didn't run next door and open the door and sit there with a candle and just sit there and go through all of her senses, what she experiences as she sits there, in the hopes of being illumined, and that maybe she had that flash of light herself. Now, Rowling's never said that. That's going to be probably in the critical biography, right? The autobiography that we may never see. What other scenes and characters do you see in Rowling's work, Nick, that echo those in Castle?
So there are lots of them. Now, I mean, you need to be careful because a lot of them can be just literary tropes, but it's difficult to read the Mortmain household without thinking of the Weasleys and just the chaos and the family dynamic. There's Topaz, the bohemian model Topaz, who likes to commune with nature wearing just her Wellington boots. There's obvious correspondences there, with Luna Lovegood and Fleur Delacour to some extent, because she is stunningly beautiful. The descriptions of food. Now, we know Rowling enjoys reading writers who talk about food and also writing about food. And it's one of those books, very much for me like Strike, that you can't read for very long without getting hungry. Because even when the Mortmains have very little to eat, and about a third of the way book they start getting lots to eat, and it's described in such loving detail, I find it difficult not to go and make myself a sandwich while I'm reading it. And that's very much in the style of the Hogwarts feasts, and of course the descriptions of food in the Ichabod.
There's also just every scene in Strike is a pub fair scene.
Yes, that's right. There's James Mortmain, who I'm going to describe him as a bad dad because he's clearly a bad dad, as much as you can sympathize for him. But he's got that kind of lost quality that you can see in Xenophilius Lovegood, and the gentility, the faded gentility, is sort of an extreme version of the Chisel manner. But I have to admit, John, one of the main reason why I recommend books for you to read is not because I wish, as a part of our friendship, to give you pleasure. It's entirely self-serving. It's so that you can spot the things that I've entirely missed.
No, you're not being fair here, because you said something to me in conversation while I was reading it. You said, "Oh yeah, there's the embedded text that she's writing the book," and yes. I thought, "Oh wow, duh, that's right." I mean, that's the whole thing. She's writing this as she's got 3 notebooks that she fills up with her speed handwriting. Nobody else can read it, and she hides. It's kind of her secret text. And that's one of the things I'll point out. If you're asking me to point out some stuff, I'll point out stuff that Nick's told me already. But there's a lot, Nick.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, and this goes, we're going to go from lake to shed here, because a lot of this is just technique stuff, but there's no way Rowling doesn't pick up on the names. Okay. Mortmain is a legal term for a property that can't ever, be lost by death. Like church properties, until pretty well into the Middle Ages, were the crown couldn't do anything. I mean, the church held them, and if the abbot died or the cardinal died or whatever, it didn't go anywhere. It stayed with the church. And that kind of property is called Mortmain. All the lawyers out there, please correct me on this. But what's relevant to this, and I think that Dodie Smith knew this, is that Mortmain comes from mort manus. It means the dead hand. And so here you have James, the writer who can't write anymore. He has a dead hand. And so that the whole thing, his whole personality turns on the fact that he's not writing. His writing has literally died. And anyway, so hand being another word for writing. So that to me was a great grin and giggle. And I thought, there's no way Rowling, if she's read this thing, didn't say, "Oh, Mortmain, no, this is so good," And then there's the Stephen Collie, his name. He is literally, I mean, he's like a border collie dog. I mean, he just does everything, and he just loves you, and he's so attentive. I mean, he's not goofy, jolly, but he is like the family dog servant. And I'll come back to him because this character is really resonant with it, a Rowling favorite. And then there's Cotton. I don't know if Cotton means this. I mean, Dodie Smith writes this book in the United States.
Yeah.
She's from the UK, but she's in the United States during the 30s and really through the war, I believe. And this book isn't published until 48 or 49. Yeah. I keep getting both those dates. Anyway, she really knows the United States, and she has characters. The Cotton family is from the United States, but to cotton something in the United States can mean to understand it, to really get it. And so I think that's what we're supposed to get with them, is that they get James Mortmain. They're fascinated by him as a writer. They think all the time about reading and getting beneath the surface story, beneath the yarn quality of the story, as they put it in the book. That cotton aspect is so important there. And then there's Topaz. I mean, Pliny the Elder said that Topaz meant fire and warmth and this and that, and she is that inside the house. He's in a house which has no food and no electricity and really no warmth. Topaz is it. She's the living, resonant life of that place. It's killing her, but she is that jewel inside there. Hence Topaz. That's a brilliant choice for a name. And finally, there's Cassandra's name. Not only is she a Mortmain, and she's not a dead hand. She's writing like crazy, but she has a spirit which sees things that other people don't see. Cassandra, of course, is the famous priestess in Troy that it tells everyone exactly what's going to happen, and none of them can hear what she has to say. She's cursed. And Cassandra is like that in the book, where she sees things and she's not sure what's going to. I mean, I'll let you play that out. I'm not going to ruin that much of it. We definitely get the embedded text that I told you that Nick spotted, that is complete with intratextual references, because at one point in the story, Cassandra is trying to figure out her father, and she's thinking about what she heard someone say about psychoanalysis. She goes back into the first notebook and finds her first conversation with Simon Cotton and reads that, and it inspires her to go on to the next step and make this big thing. So it's not only a ring, probably, in terms of referencing back across the thing and having echoes and parallels, but it explicitly says she goes back into her own book to find a book to read it, to give her a clue to what to go on with. All right, back to Stephen Collie, who's the son of the maid that served the family, and she dies, and the son stays on without pay in service to the family. And I'm not sure whether he's more like Harry Potter because he lives under the stairs, or whether he's like Dobby.
Oh,
this servant orphan.
Dobby. He ends up paying them to be their servant. I mean, that's just bizarre.
Yeah, but he has little relics of pictures of his mother, pictures of Cassandra, and that reminded me of Dobby. Harry Potter doesn't have anything on his place under the stairs, and he's out of there. He wants to get out of Privet Drive with everything he can. You couldn't. I mean, it takes everything to get Stephen Collie out of that house. But here's the real thing about Stephen Collie as Harry Potter is he's an orphan with a secret power he cannot see in himself. He's a beautiful man. Apparently, all the girls in the village are in love with him, and he doesn't see it. He maintains his humility. It's as if he's a wizard and doesn't know that there's any magic at his fingertips. And it's a beautiful thing there. And I wonder if Rowling in her meditation on that subject, that she remembered this guy. Yeah. There's the really fun finish. I don't want to finish that much, but the children, let's just say they cast a transformation spell on their father.
Yeah.
And it's really an experiment in psychomachia, in working on his soul. It's sort of like the Shrieking Shack or the Chamber of Secrets. Thomas, the son, he just wants to, force his father into a hard spot. And Cassandra, of course, wants to uplift him and help him resolve some sort of inner crisis. Anyway, it's a magnificent scene. Very much as if the children are gods. They stand above their father, look down on him as if he's just, someone on earth that they're trying to reshape by heavenly influence. Magnificent thing. I really thought the Shrieking Shack and Chamber of Secrets. Well, that thing. All right, and then there's that hand kiss. We see it stories and from Smith, where from Simon, excuse me.
Yeah.
Well, it's from Smith, Dodie Smith, the writer, but it's
Yeah.
Simon's kiss, and it's love delayed but expressed. It's the silkworm finish, isn't it, Nick? I mean, where he turns over her hand, kisses the back of her hand. He kisses the palm of her hand, which is even more intimate.
Yeah.
But still, I thought, what a great finish. And if she's read this repeatedly, I think that informs the silkworm ending. And this gets even the real thing, is this haunting sense of the supernatural everywhere, especially in the invocation that Rose makes to the gargoyle before the Cottons arrive.
Yeah.
And that's just, a plain out, pagan, thing. And a woman, a virgin offering herself in sacrifice. She has to be elevated, by these things, dangerous at risk of her own life. And then it has immediate response. And they're like, you think that could have been a response to that? I'm like, oh, come on. In the story, that's pretty straightforward. And then we have Cassandra's Midsummer's Night's Eve ritual with Simon. That is Shakespearean, certainly. It's Midsummer's Night's Dream, and there's so much in it about nature and supernature and love, that love between siblings, because of course this was Cassandra and Rose's thing, but now Simon is there, and it's really the beginning of that love story. Anyway, this to me is there's an astonishing value in this for anyone that wants to get not only the some possible direct point-to-point correspondences where Rowling is hat tipping Capture the Castle, but really the whole sense of Rowling as a writer, that haunting sense of the supernatural being everywhere, the cryptonyms, the touches of psychomachia. I was whelmed reading this book. Now, and for the people like Beatrice Groves, knowing that she read this book as a young woman, there's so much literary illusion in it. Some of it is in your face, and it invites engagement, and you're answering the question. They actually ask the question, which I'm going to ask you in a second, Nick. But there's also a lot of implicit references that if you were a reader in the 30s, you would certainly recognize immediately. But let's talk about the intersection of lake and shed. The shared space of Rowling's bibliography, works that shaped her core beliefs and act as springs to her lake, and which give her many, even most of the tools that that are her intentional artistry that she deploys in the shed. Nick, what do you make of that Bronte Austen challenge that Rose makes explicitly in the story to her sister? Her sister, the writer and the avid reader, she just comes out flat out and says, "How I wish I lived in a Jane Austen novel." What does Cassandra say?
So Rose says, "How I wish I lived in a Jane Austen novel." I said, "I'd rather be in a Charlotte Bronte." Which would be nicest, Jane with a touch of Charlotte or Charlotte with a touch of Jane? This is the kind of discussion I very much, I like very much, but I wanted to get on with my journal. So I just said 50% either way would be perfect and started to write determinedly. Now, I could imagine this really appealing to Rowling. It is the kind of conversation she would enjoy. She talks about Jane Austen, less so Bronte, but she talks about Jane Austen all the time. But it would make her think, okay, Austen or Bronte? And it made me think, okay, which do I think Rowling prefers? But first, so we talked the first one in the series, we talked about Aurora Leigh, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning has talked about both Bronte and Austen, and she's not an uncritical fan of Jane Austen. And she can be quite scathing with it as well. So she considers her a superficial writer. Now,
I guess if you write Aurora Leigh, you can say that kind
well,
of thing,
yeah,
but really,
but
it's like being able to talk about Shakespeare.
the point is with both Austen and Bronte, she argues, and it's academics have distilled this from lots of brief references in her letters and written work. But both Austen and Bronte deal with moral questions and moral choices. But where Austen relies on doing the right thing or acting for the sake of love, Bronte talks about this is what God wants. This is the spiritual thing to do, which is why she owes to Bronte a greater depth to the motivation of her characters. I said J.K. Rowling talks about Austen all the time. I think if you had to choose who's her favorite author, just in the quantity of references, you'd say Austen. But there's also a subconscious clue. She's got two dogs, West Highland Terriers. One of them is called Bronte, after Charlotte Bronte. The other one is called Emma, after Emma Woodhouse, the heroine of her favourite Austen novel. And she describes their characters thus: Emma, she's a bundle of love and joy. Her sister Bronte, she's a bundle of opinions, stubbornness, and hard boundaries.
Seriously.
So,
yeah,
so
this okay. That's but what Nick do you in this book?
yeah.
Because I think clearly Rose and Cassandra are asking the reader, is this book more Jane Austen
Yeah.
or is it more Charlotte Bronte?
So the narrator says 50-50, and maybe that's the author's intention. But I think there is, if we're to use Barrett Browning's criticism and distinction between Austen and Bronte, I'd say it's more Bronte. This is a very spiritual book, and that it is not a stretch to find God in this book.
But it's Jane Austen in that you have these two sisters that are looking for matches.
Yeah,
And minor fallen gentry. I mean, it really is, and the humor is
yeah,
extraordinary.
it,
And
it
the
is.
types they use, bringing the Americans in. I mean, really, Nick, you hooked me on that one. That's a great thing. Especially when she's with Neil, who is from the West Coast and is a rancher, as opposed to Simon, who's from the East Coast. It was great that she chose those things. It'd be as if that she had somebody from the Northern
Yeah,
Hebrides and another one from Cornwall. They're both from the United Kingdom. Anyway, this and
it doesn't. It doesn't.
she tries to get inside his head to see how he's feeling when he's in England, and she
Yeah,
suddenly she feels this wide open space and then opens her eyes and feels incredibly cramped. And I thought, oh dear, in my very short time in the United Kingdom, that's how I felt. It's
yeah,
just like, wow, there's a lot of people and a lot of history in a very small space here. It's like
yeah,
everywhere you turn around, it's, oh yeah, and there's this white horse from, the 15th century BC. Like, oh, doggone, we don't have any of those. But then you turn the corner and there's a school that's from the 16th century, and I mean, it's just everywhere you turn in the United Kingdom there's something going on. In the United States, yeah, you can drive a long way between those things, and the sky seems a lot bigger in the United States, Nick. And you've been here, you know that. All right. Wow. So yeah, um, I thought, yeah, 50-50 was
Yeah,
what she was aiming at. But she gives you the Austen plot, but she gives you the Bronte feel.
yeah.
Especially in that bizarre scene where they're, all but torturing their father. Anyway, not to spoil it, but boy, you got to read the story.
It's sometimes hard to appreciate. Actually, this novel is not so very far away from being 100 years old. It's set in the 1930s. It was written in the early 40s. We know it was rewritten and rewritten through to publication, but to me it seems still astonishingly modern. Her father, the blocked writer, is a literary novelist of the modern school. Um, do you think that Dodie Smith was engaging with more contemporary novelists as well?
Yeah, I can't see anybody reading this book in the late 40s or Smith writing it in the 30s who was not thinking about. Mort Main is famous for writing an enigmatic or puzzling type book, and his first name is James. James Deadhand is his name, and I think they're referring to Joyce almost without exception. There's the beginning of the novel that he starts near the end. I guess I'm giving away something, but there's some pieces that he's beginning to write at the end of the book, and it starts off with the cat on the mat. The cat sat on the mat, which is this kind of a childish thing, I guess, in the UK for learning how to spell or something,
Yeah,
to read. And he starts by repeating that way. Well, Joyce famously begins Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, his most accessible novel by far, with the moo cows. That a child seeing an animal and making the sounds of this kind of thing. And it's, I don't think there's any person who is reading that, even in the 40s, that wouldn't say, "Oh, it's James Joyce." This is that, and also I don't know how well this was known at the time, but Joyce, in between writing Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake, he was so exhausted by doing the proofs for Ulysses that he didn't pick up pen or paper for more than a year. He just sat on his hands in shock before he began to take the notes in pieces that become Finnegan's Wake, and that's very much the suggestion at the end of that book. And throughout the book, we get, especially the Cotton family and the Fox Cottons, are after Mortmain to discuss his book. Jacob, was Jacob
Jacob's
Wrestling?
Wrestling. Yeah,
Jacob's Wrestling. And it's pretty much, Joyce's agony. I mean, Joyce famously made a comment that, you make a book into a puzzle and then academics will fight about what it means. And that's your only way now to literary immortality. Basically impenetrability means immortality. And Mortmain, though, who is in this writer's block stage that goes on for ages, unlike Joyce, who only had a year of writer's block, famous writer's block, he feels he can't do that again. He can't match that literary genius that he had displayed in his first book. Now, in the story, Joyce is not mentioned, I don't think. Is he, Nick? Do we
no,
get
no,
any
he's not.
explicit? We get Proust and Swann's Way get
Yeah.
a call out. And again, I don't think any reader of the time period would think anything but Joyce.
Do we know? Do we know if J.K. Rowling has read James Joyce?
To my knowledge, she's never mentioned it other than to say something like, it's not Joyce or something. I mean, it's
I'm
uh,
I'm very grateful, John. I'm very, very grateful.
yeah. I mean, people talk about Joseph Campbell, the
Yeah.
famous mythologist. Certainly the man who's brought mythological studies to the popular mind more than anybody else. He started out his life as a man who wrote basically the hidden key to James Joyce. I don't know if it was Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake, but he basically tried to make those books penetrable, to other people. And that's how he got into myth, and that whole sideline of his became his whole life. Joyce, I read Joyce as a high school senior. I think maybe that's a commonplace in the UK. It certainly is in better schools in the United States. No, we don't read Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake. You read Dubliners, and then you read Portrait of the Artist. And like Thomas in the book, those seemed to me that really accessible. I didn't really struggle with those. Of course, I didn't understand any of their depths, but I certainly didn't struggle to figure out what they were saying. And Rowling, I'm sure, has read at least those books by Joyce.
Yeah.
But I think it's much more likely that she read Capture the Castle, which is a critique of Joyce, really a book in admiration. Simon says at the end, I'm trying to get you on your father's side, to Cassandra, trying to get you to appreciate, how he writes. That's her argument for Joyce. And yet her book is an implicit critique of Joyce's style as being impenetrable.
Yeah.
And so here in this book, we have an Austen Bronte version of Joyce, where we get engaging characters and themes and spirituality, and yet we get enigmas. Simon not famously, but he invents a word which Cassandra loves, a neologism, and she's that her father is an enigmatist, that he's creating puzzles for other people to solve. Now I'm gonna read part of that. It doesn't really destroy much of the story for people, but it will tell you why you should read the book. Okay. Simon is telling Cassandra that he has to be the support to his father. He's looking to her to be his primary reader. I was astonished and flattered, Cassandra says. Well, I'm only too willing, but if he won't explain, why won't he, Simon? Because it's the essence of an enigma that one must solve it for oneself, she responds, but at least one is allowed to know, well, the rules for solving puzzles. He said he rather agreed with me there, and that was why he'd had persuaded father to let him talk to me. Do you want to ask me questions? I certainly do. The first one is, why does his work have to be an enigma at all? Simon laughed. You've started off with a honey. No one will ever know why a creator creates the way he does. Anyway, your father had a very distinguished forerunner. God made the universe an enigma. I said, and very confusing it's been for everybody. I don't see why father had to copy him, capital H. Simon said he thought every creative artist did, and that perhaps every human being was potentially creative. Nick, I hope you're thinking about this interior logos thing we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think one of the things your father's after is to stimulate that potential creativeness to make those who study his work share in its actual creation. Cue Rowling's comments about reader-writer interaction there in the imagination. Of course, he says he sees creation as discovery. I mean, everything is already created by the first cause. Call it God if you like. Everything is already there to be found, italicized. I think he must have seen me looking a little bewildered because he stopped himself and said, I'm not putting this clearly. Wait, give me a minute. Go on. At last he said, I think your father believes that the interest so many people take in puzzles and problems, which often starts in earliest childhood, represents more than a mere desire for recreation, that it may even derive from man's eternal curiosity about his origin. Anyway, it makes use of certain faculties for progressive cumulative search, in italics, which no other mental exercise does. Your father wants to communicate his ideas through those faculties. I asked him to repeat it slowly, and suddenly I saw absolutely. But how does it work? Italicized, I cried. He told me to think of a crossword puzzle of the hundreds of images that pass through the mind while solving one. In your father's puzzles, the sum total of the images adds up to the meaning he wants to convey. And the sum total of all the sections of his book, all the puzzles, problems, patterns, progressions, I believe there's even going to be a detective section, will add up to his philosophy of search creation.
Wow.
I mean, there's more, but that passage is about finding meaning and being in search of that and solving a puzzle. Okay. Dodie Smith is saying that's what makes Joyce so valuable, is that he's forcing readers out of their comfortable space into this. I mean, really, Rowling's love for Nabokov is exactly like this. Nabokov, for a time, supported himself as a crossword puzzle maker. I mean, all of Nabokov's works involve tremendous puzzles and structures and enigmas and riddles. And Rowling, reading this book, has the model of a young woman being told this is what real writers do and what Dodie Smith is doing. Now, she's basically trying to write like James Joyce, but she's putting James Joyce into a young adult Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte novel. And it's so brilliantly done and conceived. I can see why this would run through fire through a school of literati, like wherever Beatrice Groves was going to school, because this, you can see Rowling's reinvention of the schoolboy novel with its hidden alchemical, chiastic, soul and crisis allegories and embedded Christian symbolism. They can all be seen as her brilliant interpretation of Simon's explanation of art to Cassandra, and her dedication to writing a book, Rowling's dedication to writing a book like I Capture the Castle. I mean, that is with the scene where the vicar tells her about the intersection of art and faith and God being where we come from, where we're going, and what gives us meaning, and how art is to do the same thing. And then her explaining that the art of reading and writing has to be the engagement of these faculties that will take us to our origin. And that faculty, clearly, Nick, in terms of the perennialists, is this logos capacity, which is your conscience, your imagination, whatever you want to call that. This, I think, is Rowling's model for the kind of book she wants to write, more than the Austen, more than the Bronte, that Dodie Smith's book, which is about writing for a young woman who wants to be a writer. Rowling continuously, when she was rereading this book, finding out what kind of writer she wanted to be, and she had a model for it in this book. Whew. I mean, I can't be more grateful to you, Nick, for essentially forcing me in duress here in the darkness. I'm reading this book by candlelight in my castle, which has no electricity in it. I get to experience Capture the Castle. That experience to me as a Rowling reader, the so-called dean of Harry Potter scholars, has really congealed a lot of the things that I've been working on for decades. I think Rowling, if we have one book to recommend to people, I used to say that, what was the one book? C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, if you want to count that as one book. I mean, that's a wonderful place to get the alchemy and the mysteries and the Christian symbolism and the psychomachia. That's a lot of stuff inside the Space Trilogy. That's a great one stop. But as a more accessible one, the one that we know that Rowling has read, because she doesn't ever mention the Space Trilogy, is I would go with Capture the Castle. Or,
Wow.
in Nabokov, Pale Fire. But who's going to read Nabokov, Pale Fire? You recommend Nabokov to people, and they all do that. I don't want to read Lolita. People won't talk to me. I'll be ostracized. You can carry I Capture the Castle anyway. Boys will think you're reading a Robert Louis Stevenson book, and girls will just be delighted that you're so hip. Anyway, Nick, we've been talking already for I don't know. I think people haven't read this book. We haven't read this book until very recently,
No.
and we're supposed to be Rowling people. So I've already given away too many clues to the story, but I don't think that will will upset your reading, because I didn't talk about really any of the Bronte and Austen elements that make this story so wonderful. And the writer, as you say, who is speed writing this novel, so
Yeah.
you get this stream of consciousness effect. But as you say, she must have spent 15 years writing this book, Nick.
Yeah.
This is one of the most calculated books that you
Yeah.
could possibly imagine. You know, this is it comes off like this adolescent girl just running this stuff off. The same impression you get when you read the first page of Minnikin's Wake, which if you've read the first page, that's as far as I've ever gotten. I just did okay, sorry, When I need a footnote for every line, I'm done. Life is. I've got to get my way through Fairy Queen. I got books
Yes.
left of my 6 books to do that. Anyway, I want to close this off. Unless you've got other stuff to say, Nick. I want to close this off with our sharing our favorite scene or conversation in Castle, with the hope that our serious reader audience will read I Capture the Castle and share their favorites in the comment boxes. And because I've been rambling on now for 15 minutes. I'm going to let you go first, Nick.
So I think it's the sign of a good book that is going to be reread, that when you flick through trying to find that scene that made you laugh so that I can read it out, you find another bit and you go, oh no, that's good. Oh no, that's so good. So I'm going to do that bit instead. So this is their first trip to London. It's the first chapter of the Shilling book, chapter 6. And in my head, it is a direct parallel to the wizards wandering through Little Whingin, just in terms of people being completely outside of their normal milieu. It was queer how different things felt after we changed from our little toy train at King's Crypt. The feel of the country went. It was as if the London air was trapped in the London train, and our white suits began to look peculiar. They looked much, much more peculiar when we got to London. People really stared at us. Rose noticed it at once. It's because they admire our suits, I said, hoping to soothe her. And I did think they looked nicer than most of the drab clothes women were wearing. We look conspicuous, she said with deepest shame. Little did she know how much more conspicuous we would look when we got home. It was 3 years since we'd been in London. We never knew it well. Of course, yesterday was the first time I ever walked through the city. It was fascinating, especially the stationers' shops. I could look at stationers' shops for ever and ever. Rose says they are the dullest shops in the world, except perhaps butchers. I don't see how you can call butchers' shops dull. They are too full of horror. We kept getting lost and having to ask policemen, who were all rather playful and fatherly. One of them kindly held up traffic for us, and a taxi driver made kissing noises at Rose. Just how perfectly charming and uncomfortable and quirky.
That's magnificent. I'm flipping through the book, because I've already read my favorite passage, Nick. I've read that he took God as his example in writing enigmas, and I was just doing that. Wow, and that whole thing about how every human being potentially creative because they're continuous with this logos fabric of reality. Which creates everything moment to moment. I was just so gobsmacked by that. And you can imagine me, Nick, after midnight in the dark, reading this passage, doing here it is. This is the whole thing. I did. I notice now there's a conversation with the first one between, I'm not going to read the passage because it's very long. It's a large part of a chapter, but it's Simon and Cassandra at the Midsummer Night's Eve ritual that they celebrate in the thing. Either that or Neil's swimming with her around the moat. They go around twice or just once. They swim around the castle. Those scenes of a young woman with young men, and their innocence, on both sides. There's nothing predatory about the man's relationship with the woman, and there's nothing especially flirtatious or anything. It's just a man and a woman together at that age is so, she complains later that she can't be that naive anymore. But the expression of it is so engaging and compelling and convincing that if you don't fall in love with Cassandra at that point, there's something really
Yeah.
wrong with you. Swing around the castle or dancing around the fire, have your medication checked. There's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
male or female. You fall in love with this woman. She's such an original. I mean, really, not in Austen or Bronte do I think you meet someone that's as lovely and lovingly represented as Cassandra Mortmain is.
She's not a paragon. So she is a flawed character. So she has that charm of being a real person with struggles. But yes, absolutely, she has a beautiful soul, and that really does shine through.
Yeah, I really think I read this book like Stephen Colley. I was like, who wouldn't be in love with Cassandra Mortmain? And basically, when he says that the sister is, not a good person, I was like, yeah. One for you, Stephen. You got that. You got two right on. Cassandra's the keeper, Rose disposable. This I did notice though while looking through this that Simon does mention James Joyce. They talk about when Simon first converses with James Mortmain and just says, "Why haven't you written anything since?" He's really embarrassed. And so he comes up with this reason why his father hasn't written anything, which is very flattering. And they refer to that again at the end of the book when they really get into what writing is about. So this is about halfway, Nick, about halfway through. We get this reference right in the story turn. And he says, I don't think your father spotted me as a fake. And in one way, what I said is true, He can't exactly develop his Jacob wrestling method because other writers have gone far ahead of them on rather similar lines. James Joyce, for instance. Okay, and that's in the center of the book. He makes the connection between Mortmain and Joyce. But really the keeper for me is what I've already beaten to death, is that Dodie Smith, in saying that the writers take God as their model, remember that what they're not trying to do is present things naturally, but things which you have to struggle to solve or to penetrate, because that's the manner of God's creation. Now, Christoph Schuon, the premier perennialist, said that art that simply tries to imitate nature, present nature as God created it, he considers that Luciferian, because it's not from that creative aspect of the person who creates as God creates. And they all the great perennialists, Coomaraswamy especially, but Nasir as well as Schuon, cite Thomas Aquinas on this point, that art, sacred art especially, and remember, sacred art is not religious art. Religious art is just art that has a religious subject. Sacred, you can, almost all religious art today is profane because it represents those things naturally. Sacred art can be everything from the shape of your furniture to your cutlery to whatever. Sacred art is things that invite you to transcend the world by calling in a greater realm than the one in which you can see in the natural world. Rowling, as I've argued at least 3 times now, put the links down below where I've done this. I spelled it all out. I actually attached it to the last post we sent out. Rowling is writing non-liturgical sacred art, where she is telling story that invites that illuminative experience that Cassandra Mortmain has inside the chapel, where she's surrounded by darkness, and then there's this flash of light, which is the divine. And that's what Rowling is after, I think. For herself as much as for her readers, and why we do what we do here, Nick, is to say, let's go through these things and puzzle out these enigmas and find them together.
Well, that's absolutely the story turn for Aurora Lee as well. Is that transformative effect of art through the power of God. So that's 2 of our 3 authors. That's Elizabeth Barrett Browning That's Dodie Smith. Do I need to reread Louisa May Alcott? Does Alcott make any reference to?
But you've read it a lot more recently than I have.
Yeah.
I wrote a long bit about it, and I went into my notes trying to find the stuff that I wrote about that when I was teaching a sixth grade class on Little Women and freaking out because there was so much about it that was Rowling laden. I wrote a longish piece about that. Maybe I should send that out. You can write your piece about it. Then we'll meet and we'll talk about that again. I'm not going to reread Little Women because we're in the midst of a move, Nick. I've got two subjects I want to talk about. I want to talk about the part 5 chapters from Hallmark Man and whether it's a ring or not. And I want to talk about that blood test or that blood revelation where, rolling in a Twitter feed, oh, by the way, I've got I'm borderline hemophiliac. Whoa, whoa. She dismissed this, not a state secret, but there's a lot of blood in her books.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like she's Mickey Spillane and there's blood splattered on the walls. No, there's some of that too. But really, the meaning of blood is something on which she has clearly meditated.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nick. You do some Louisa May Alcott. I want to tell you though, I had the A box was in the absolute corner of where I'm stacking these boxes. I had to go through like 3 layers of boxes to get to it. I get to the A box, I open it up. Sure enough, there's 12 books about Louisa May Alcott. And I thought, what am I doing? I've got so many things to do. I'm not going to reread this book. But
I'm not going to mention Zadie Smith, John. You can leave that box alone.
Okay, thank you. I'll tell you but I shouldn't be that ungrateful because except for your pushing me, I wouldn't have gone into the box beneath Shakespeare to find this thing. That was a wonderful connection. To all our readers out there,
yes.
I hope that you enjoy these conversations as much as we do. Thank you for those of you that throw some money into the little tin pot here, the little cup that I'm wiggling. I've got to go take down my yurt, Nick. I have a man taking down my yurt right now. I've got to go out there and to make sure he isn't crowned by my ring. And God willing, we'll have better news next week. And it's Merry Christmas Eve for you guys.
Yes.
It's almost St. Herman's Day for us who are Orthodox. It's almost St. Spiridon's Day for us. Happy December 12th, all of you people.
If you are celebrating, I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas. We will see you again at some point next week, I'm sure. John, I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say our thoughts are with you. I hope this move goes as painlessly as it can.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everybody.